President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and President Donald Trump could take a step forward, ending the 3-year Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah, a high-stakes meeting between the two leaders begins in just about an hour at the White House. They're expected to sign a deal giving the U.S. access to Ukraine's mineral resources. That would set up an investment fund jointly managed by both countries. Ukraine would use it to rebuild its war-torn country. President Trump has framed the deal as a way to get compensation for aid provided by the Biden administration. While meeting with British Prime Minister, President Trump said he was confident Russian President Vladimir Putin would honor a peace deal made with Ukraine.
I've known him for a long time now, and I think he will. I don't believe he's going to violate his word. I don't think he'll be back when we make a deal. I think the deal's going to hold. Now, they're going to have security.
Now, the deal does not include U.S. security guarantees, which Ukraine's president says is vital. Fox News anchor Shannon Bream with Fox News Sunday joins me now. Good morning to you.
Good to see you, Brandon.
All right, so this meeting between Zelensky and Trump, how does this factor into the larger picture of the war with Russia and the attempt to end that war?
So the White House is portraying this as just one piece of the puzzle, that we think what will happen today is there's going to be a signing of this deal over the rare earth minerals that Ukraine has, things that everybody needs access to, including the U.S., like titanium and lithium. But what Ukraine really wants is security guarantees of some kind. That sounds like, according to the White House, that is going to be something separate. This deal would be about American companies investing in the mining and the recapture of these minerals and sharing in the profits after having invested hundreds of billions of U.S. tax dollars there in Ukraine. So I would expect Zelensky is going to push in private and maybe publicly, too, that they want those security guarantees in addition, but it sounds like this deal doesn't include that.
Yeah, boy. And the hits from Doge just keep on coming. Yet another round of layoffs and firings.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of people unsettled here in the D.C. area where we have, potentially hundreds of thousands of federal workers, and everybody's logging on each day to find out what it means for them. Now, a federal judge in California last night said that one of the big agency pronouncements on mass firings was no good. It could not proceed, but you've got some conflict there in some of these lower courts. I would imagine some of those things bubble to the Supreme Court very quickly. In fact, we're waiting on a decision from the court today about forcing the administration to pay out foreign aid. Wednesday night, the Chief Justice put that on hold so they could look at the issue, but we could get a decision on that as early as this afternoon.
All these so-called savings from Doge, when do they expect that to actually present itself in the U.S. budget?
Well, some of this is looking forward-looking. These are contracts for things that have been canceled that would have been paid out in the future. Others say there's confusion about what exactly this money is and where it comes from. Now, there is talk of the House wanting to put some of the Doge savings into the budget because, remember, they're trying to extend the 2017 tax cuts, doing things that actually cost money and need offsets. But there's a feeling over in the Senate, if the House measure comes to them, including Doge cuts as part of the deal, they're not going to survive in the Senate because Democrats simply won't agree to that.
All right, Sunday morning, who do you have on tap?
So we are going to start with a legal panel because of all of these fights that are going down and what they really mean in the testing of executive power. We're going to dig into all of that with our legal panel, and we'll have a White House guest I should be able to announce in just an hour or so.
All right, looking forward to it, Shannon. Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Fox News Sunday with Shannon Bream airs right here Sunday morning at 8 a.m.